How do you feel as a coffee farmer when people pay premium price for a cup of coffee at Starbucks?
Uh,
So how laborious is the process?
I think the most laborious thing about it is picking the coffee,
Hmm.
harvesting it from the tree. Because what really happens is you get to see a lot of climate change during that time, at least in the recent present.
Hey guys, welcome to third episode of Q at Podcast. In this podcast, we're gonna talk about coffee, specifically Indian coffee. And our guest for today's podcast is Lynn Mascarenhas. She's a wildlife biologist turned fourth generation coffee farmer. Welcome to the podcast, Lynn.
Thank you, Clinton.
Yeah. So we will be talking about coffee all along the podcast, specifically Indian coffee. And if you love coffee and if you would like to know more about coffee, from its variety, from its history, from its processing, from its farming to fermenting or even economics, so this is the podcast you don't want to miss. So yeah, welcome to the podcast, Lynn. How do you feel?
I feel really excited to be a part of this podcast. It's one of a kind, and it's my first podcast today. And let's see how it goes.
Yes, great. So before we get into this podcast, I would like to warm our audiences a bit. So just loosen up. So before we get into this kind of deeper, so let's have a trivia on coffee. For you guys, it's not for Lynn, it's for you. So and there is a prize, of course. So I'm gonna ask you three questions. All you have to do is answer in the comments. And there will be one lucky winner. And the winner would be, it's not about how much you answered right. It's not about right answers. You can answer wrong. I mean, you can answer whatever top of your head. I will correct. I will go through the comments and I will correct the answers. The winner would be the one who has more likes in the comments. Okay. So the prize is bag of specialty coffee from Lynn's estate, directly from the farm, delivered directly to your doorstep. So here are the questions. Which state in India produces over 70% of coffee output? Number one. Number two, which country is the largest importer of Indian coffee, accounting for 29% of Indian coffee export? And third question, it takes how much liters of water to grow, to process, and to transport enough coffee beans for one single cup of coffee? Yes, type your answer in the comments. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Just type and get more likes to win this competition. Hey guys, if you like our content and if you would like to support us, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. All right. So let's get back to our conversation. Before we talk about exactly on coffee farming, so I have some of the questions since you are a fourth generation coffee farmer. So the question may sound silly, but they are profound in their own rights. So the question is, how do you like your coffee? Black, cold, hot, or with milk?
I always advise people to drink my coffee black so that they understand my coffee. So I do exactly the same so that I can understand my coffee and know how my coffees have been produced. If what the intention with which I produce them, and is it really showcasing that in the cup. So
So,
I always drink it black
mhm.
and do not add any milk or sugar because I get the actual taste of the coffee itself.
So even when you drink coffee, it's an experiment time for you to see the
Yes.
perfection of your farm. It's not a regular, like a coffee time where
No,
regular people do. No.
no, it's not
So,
like that for
okay.
me.
Do you
Because
notice like anything is missing in my coffee today or, any like specific of it?
I think it depends on how you brew it.
Okay.
Okay. And sometimes it also depends how a roaster has roasted the coffee. Okay. So sometimes we know that a particular coffee needs to taste like tropical fruits, right?
Hmm.
So when I taste the cup of coffee, when one type of roaster has roasted it, it will taste like tropical fruits and it'll have like a side smaller note of caramel. But when a different type of roaster does it, there is a high chance of it tasting more like caramel and less like tropical berries, you know. So I get to see that depending on, who has roasted it, how we have brewed the coffee. And especially I like to have iced brews. So I always brew it on a V60, like a cold, So yeah, so when I have that, it has more subtle flavors. So that's what I'm more into. I'm not a person who likes to drink strong coffee, which is funny because Robusta is known to be strong.
Okay.
But I brew it in a specific way that it's more subtle than what it should be.
You really are the fourth generation coffee farmer. I'm sure your parents, like whoever, they don't drink like this, right? So they just have a
They are
coffee with
more.
milk.
They are actually more into drinking filter coffees because they have always been brought up in that way. Uh, but I guess my mom is more into tea and not
Okay.
coffee, which is hilarious. But I think most of the planters, they don't drink as much coffee as you think they should, And I think this is a big missing link. Not drinking your own estate's coffee kind of would, you don't know what you're really selling. So that
Correct.
becomes, I think that's a big gap in most planters. I think they need to start drinking their own coffees first.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like for whatever price you're selling, if your coffee is really that good. So no one can bluff and tell you
Correct.
your coffee is not good because you will know what it is.
Beautiful. And now the second question would be, how do you feel as a coffee farmer when people pay premium price for a cup of coffee at Starbucks?
Uh, I guess I should still be happy, like at least someone's making the money. But I wish at the end, a farmer could make that amount of
Okay.
money because there's a lot of hard work gone into it. Like it's good that, someone in the chain is making money, but I really, really wish a farmer would get, a good sum in that. Yeah. Because without the origin, you
Do
don't
you
have
know
the coffee.
where they get the coffee beans from, the Starbucks? Is it Indian or the...
They do have Indian coffees.
Oh, is it?
Yes, they do
Okay.
have Indian coffees.
Before we get into still deeper, I think let's go back to history. Like history is really exciting. And I did a kind of research on coffee's history, how it originated, how humanity had its first coffee. And today's topic is coffee in India. So, how did it end up in India? So, very interesting story that is tied up. So, I think we will discuss that first to audience who don't know how coffee ended up in India and what's the history of coffee. So, if you know, you can act, you can join me in my storytelling, or you can act that you don't know. Anything is fine. But why history is like it kind of adds a flavor to our conversation because whatever we're going to discuss today is the present stuff. So adding history to it kind of, bridges the, we could see how far we have come to the present. So yeah, I think, yeah, let's talk about history. So it's a story time, guys. Lynn, do you know where the coffee came from? Which country it originated from?
I think it was Ethiopia.
You're right. So, yes, Ethiopia is considered as the epicenter of where the coffee came from. The story of world's first coffee involves a goat herder. His name is Kaldi. So the time is 800 AD. So what happened is there was a goat herder named Kaldi. So he found something strange happening with the goats in his farm. When he was inspecting the goats, he found the goats were acting quite strange, quite energetic, exciting after eating a berry from a tree. So then, like, it kind of intrigued him. So he tried the berries to himself, and he also found himself excited and very alert. And then he took those berries to the monk, and the monk had a look at it, and he claimed that this is the, work of a devil. Then threw the coffee beans into the fire, and after some time, there was an irresistible, a fragrant smell coming from the fire. The monk couldn't resist, so he quickly racked the cherries from the fireplace, and he realized his mistake. So he crushed the cherries into amber and then placed it in the jar. And then to preserve that, he poured hot water. And then he couldn't still resist. And he had a cup of coffee, that first cup of coffee. And he realized he became very alert. And from then, he started using coffee to stay awake every night for, spiritual purpose, for chanting, for prayers. And that's how coffee, that was the first purpose of coffee, to stay alert in the night for spirituality. And then coffee spread to Yemen in 13th century, and farmers in Yemen started growing coffee. And in by 14th century, its popularity grew across Egypt, Persia, and Turkey, and across the Middle East, Islamic countries. And they considered coffee as a gift from God because they used mainly for the spiritual purposes to stay alert in the night for namaz and prayers. And that's the history of coffee. And then it spread to Europe and many other places, how it ended up in India. So there is another interesting story. This involves a Sufi saint and pilgrimage and a daring act of smuggling. This happened in around 17th century. There was a Sufi saint named Baba Budan. So he traveled from India to Mecca, which is the holy city of Islam, for pilgrimage. And on his way back, he came to Mocha, a port at Yemen, and there he found uh, a drink called kwawa. So back then it was called kwawa. He was really amazed by its taste and its refreshing property. So then he decided, okay, let me get that to India. But there was a problem. The Arabs, they were very strict with their trade routes. So they didn't let anyone you know uh, take the coffee beans with them. They even boiled the green beans and made them infertile before exporting them somewhere. They didn't want anyone to grow coffee elsewhere other than the Middle East, and they just wanted to keep the coffee to themselves. This Baba Budan was really determined to get coffee to India. So he decided to smuggle. You know what happened? How did he smuggle?
He actually got seven beans, I
Yeah, right.
suppose. Yeah, and I think he kept it in his beard.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He chose 7 beans because it is the sacred number in Islam. And then, yeah, he traveled, sailed back to India. He reached Mangalore port, Karnataka, and moved inland towards his hometown, which is Chikmagalur, where Lynn is from. And he planted the 7 coffee beans on the hill, and the beans sprouted. The plant grew into a coffee and gave coffee beans, and that was India's first coffee plantation. And that hill is called Baba Budangiri, right?
Yes.
Pretty attractive tourist destination. And then he gave some of his coffee beans to his friends and neighbors to grow at their own places. And eventually, coffee, was spread to Coorg, to Tamil Nadu, to Kerala, and the farmers started growing it. The technique of growing it eventually, evolved, and this formed the coffee belt of India, where the majority of the coffee is grown in India. And next time, like when you sip a cup of coffee, just remember the legend Baba Budan and his daring act of smuggling. I'm done with the stories, so let's directly get back to our conversation. Um, yeah, Lynn is my junior. She did her master's in wildlife biology. Um, and you graduated, right? You
Yeah.
graduated. So tell us about your journey, like in wildlife, and why did you decide to become a coffee farmer and quit a career in wildlife biology and then come back to your farm and like take up coffee farming?
actually, my journey did start with wildlife. So I've done my master's in wildlife conservation action in Pune
Okay.
from Bharati Vidyapeeth University. And for my research, I have actually done my research project on the diversity of birds in forests and coffee plantations
Oh, okay.
around Chikmagalur, Margundi itself.
So you're dealing with birds, ornithology.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was more into birds,
Okay.
working with them, understanding that how many of the birds are actually there. And I started with that. But every time I would go and research, by the end of my everyday walk, I would get to see the coffee laborers, working at the farm. There's always something always interesting going on the background. And I used to always get to see that like a daily thing. And yeah, before I knew it, I, finished my research. I got to see how we had a very high diversity of birds in our coffee plantations. And I also got to see in that span of 4 months, how the birds are affected for a period of 1.5 month. And the reason being that the ground level birds that are supposed to be there were absent for 1.5
Okay.
months.
How?
And I was wondering exactly what is the reason behind this. And I kept asking my dad, what is really going on? What's the work?
Which bird specifically?
The ground level birds,
Okay. Okay.
which are granivorous birds, they eat the seeds.
Okay. Of
Okay.
coffee too?
No, they
Not-
eat the seeds of the grass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I couldn't figure out like why are these birds really absent. So when I asked my dad, we were like looking at each and every work happening at the farm, trying to jot down, okay, what's the reason? What's the reason? And we realized that we had been weeding the estate at that time, which basically means removing the weeds from the ground level so that we can put the manure at that time. And so that was what was happening, and the birds were actually being affected.
Wow.
And I made up my mind on that day when I realized that, okay, I need to go sustainable. And that's how I started my journey. And I actually started managing the estate from then onwards. But I didn't manage for more than 6 to 7 months because I already got introduced to different things with coffee, getting to meet different planters, getting to see, oh, people are trying such unique things out there. People are drying coffees on raised beds. They're fermenting coffees. Oh my God, what's really happening,
Okay. Nice.
And it got me really interested, into all of this. And before I knew it, I turned from manager to processing coffees and making
Hands-on.
making specialty coffees within no time.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that was my little journey from wildlife to getting to coffee plantation. And speaking of specialty coffee, so I started in November 2021, and I started working with 6 lots of coffee where I, just processed it in different ways. I absolutely had no hopes on how it's going to turn out or how are people going to like it. I didn't know any of that.
Just experimenting.
Yeah, just experimented with 6 lots, just see what's going to happen.
So what do you
And
mean by 6 lots? Like 6 different
Six
coffee?
different lots processed in a very different way. Like
Okay,
each
okay,
fermentation is
okay.
very unique, very
Then take
different.
a survey which one does well. with
basically
the-
wanting to see what's going to do well, which of these 6 will be the best.
Can we
right?
talk about this thing later? Because I
Yeah.
think this is gonna be could be a next topic. I think a huge topic, specialty coffee. I would
Yes.
like to really know more about specialty coffee. Right now, you did specialty coffee, and my question is actually, you were doing your wildlife research at your coffee estate itself. So your first observation was the absence of ground nesting birds.
Ground level birds.
Ground level
Yeah.
birds. Sorry. Did you make any other observations like how birds interact with the coffee farm? Do they? Was there any interaction to the ecology in the coffee estate?
It's, I think for birds, no, but maybe for monkeys, yes.
Do wildlife show up in your farm?
There are a lot of bonnet macaques actually in our coffee plantation.
Okay.
And they keep jumping from bamboos to arecas and, they keep coming down to the coffees
Okay.
during the harvest time, which is in December. So if you're like, it's your lucky day, you actually get to see a group of monkeys sitting on the coffee trees, swaying from the top canopy to, down to the coffee trees and grabbing either coffee cherries, or sometimes they break the entire branch. And the minute they see us, they like run to the top canopy and they sit and eat these
Okay.
coffees.
Do they eat coffee?
Yeah, they eat the coffee cherries,
Okay.
and they spit out the beans.
Oh, they're just for the flesh of the fruit,
Yeah,
not for the
yes.
caffeine or something.
No.
That flesh doesn't have caffeine.
I actually don't know that
Okay,
much.
okay.
I think it has a certain level of caffeine because it's a Robusta, species. So definitely it will have, because when compared to Arabica, it's meant to have double the caffeine level. So of course there should be some amount of caffeine.
So I think that would be kind of an issue, like wildlife interacting with the farm. How do like neighbors and other farmers like cope up with that? Like, do they have any strategy to minimize, or they just let let the wildlife do whatever it wants to do?
I think it depends on the farmer, how they look at it. Some people look at it as an issue. So, of course, they will get guns. They'll try to
Okay.
shoot. They will also try to get firecrackers, disturb them, basically chase them off and stuff like that. But I've also heard insane stories of this where people have been, telling, just paint the monkey silver. So when it goes back to its community, all the other monkeys are going to be scared. So like there are these weird things that you also get to hear.
Okay.
But because I'm a wildlife fan, I don't support any of this.
Yeah.
I like making money off that too.
Okay, how?
So I take these same the coffee beans that are put down, and it's already kind of fermented in a specific way.
Wow.
Then I further ferment it in another type of way, and I package and try to sell that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Directly from primate's mouth.
Yeah.
Say. Just kidding.
because the reason being, because they are so good at selecting the red coffee cherries. They pick only the best ones. It's not like they're gonna choose something bad. Of course, you're gonna.
It's not random.
Yeah, it's not random. It's like perfectly picked coffee cherries, the best ones. And we are
Wow.
basically utilizing that.
Nice.
Nature's
This is
pick. It's basically a nature's pick.
Very creative idea.
Yeah.
Very. How
Tried
does it look different? Like deformed beans or something?
No. It actually looks grey. Normally, the coffee beans are supposed to look green, but
Okay.
they look grey. Yeah.
Okay. Different fermentation has taken place.
Yeah,
I mean,
something completely different.
Okay. Very interesting. So you are the fourth generation coffee farmer. So your ancestors, like, they did it in the 1950s, the first coffee plantation of your farm?
Somewhere around 90 to 100 years back.
90 to 100 years back.
Yeah, from now,
God,
yeah.
Okay. I think back then, now coffee is coffee. Back then they're just trying like a new adventure, like growing coffee. So I think they have struggled a lot to the point like to establish a farm. Do you know like how did they start and what was the struggle, and how did they transition? So since you are the fourth generation coffee farmer, so how did the transition take place? Like what and all the changes have happened from 100 years of your estate?
So my great grandfather, his name was Domingo Mascarenhas. He was the one who actually left Mangalore, came towards Chikmagalur, found a place in Margundi village, okay, and he actually opened a little shop. They used to call it Angadi.
Okay, yeah.
And they used to have these shops, and what he did is he was very interested in buying a small plot, starting with the coffee production. And he opened the shop and he tried to make enough money in order to do that. And and then slowly, he was able to make that money. He bought a plot and he just started planting the coffee trees because it was a
Entrepreneur.
plain land. Yeah, it was a plain land. It's not like there was a forest, they cut down the forest. It's not that type of story. Okay. And he planted the coffee plants, and he started, uh, producing the coffee within 4 to 7 years, which would have been a really, really difficult time for him, to, spend so much money and then wait for
Yeah,
4 to 7 years to just
patience.
get that
Yeah.
back. And actually being there as a laborer at the farm, because, normally when you think of planters, you always see them like, okay, managing the estate or saying, okay, do this, do that. But for him, it was everything from scratch, And in fact, the things that I've heard about the things that he's gone through, he used to sell the coffee, right? So he has to give it to a curing works back then. So he
What
used
is
to.
curing?
Curing works is basically a place, like a mill, right?
Okay.
So you have the beans, and then you strip it out of that silver skin that's there. Yeah, you remove that, you try to polish and, grade the coffees according to, A grade, B grade, P berry, blah, blah. They do all of that, and then, yeah, they would like export it or whatever, But he had to go and give it to this curing works, which was in Mangalore. So what they would do is they used to have bullock carts back then, right? All muddy roads. You can imagine Chamadi Ghats, how it
From
was.
carts to the
Yes.
bullock carts
Yeah.
with the load of coffee.
Yes.
Nice.
So they had bullock carts, and each thing would have like somewhere around, I think, 7, what to say, uh, like these wooden tray-like
Got
thing,
it, got it.
continuing, And they were like, his entire harvest of the year would be on that. And he would travel all the way from Chikmagalur to Mangalore.
Through the Ghats.
Yeah, through the Ghats. And to worsen it, there used to be thieves at Chamadi. Yeah.
Damn,
So
okay.
they used to wait to loot these farmers,
Okay.
try to rob from
Did
them.
your
And it was
grandfather has a gun or something?
I don't know how he handled that. I
Okay.
wish I knew. But that's the story, behind how much hardship has gone into, just that one particular instance. And then his son, Benjamin Mascarenhas, who started with German irrigation system. This was about like, I think you could say 50, 60 years back,
Okay.
right? So it was still, irrigation was a very new thing back then. So
Okay.
he started the German irrigation pipeline
So what's
system.
German irrigation?
So it's basically irrigation. It's just the German, pipelines.
Okay.
Pipelines from there, which are fitted in the coffee plantation so that you can irrigate the coffee plants.
And this kind of sprinkler system?
Yes,
Okay.
it's like a sprinkler where the coffee gets enough water, especially during the scorching summer.
What was the irrigation system before that? It's just
We have a river actually just right beside, but I don't know
so
how
like
they
manually
really
go
would
and
have been
take
very
the-
would have been very
maybe.
manual. But this became very easy for him, by putting this, and because of the scorching, summers, this
Yeah,
was a very important thing. And if you don't irrigate, you don't get good flowers. And if you don't get good flowers, there's no pollination. If there's no pollination, there's no coffee cherries. There's no robusta at the end of it.
So that was the change, German
Yeah,
sprinkler system.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that is what he did. And then coming to my dad, that is Lionel Mascarenhas. So until then, till my dad, they have been actually producing cherry coffees.
Okay.
Which is basically you get the cherry and you dry it as a cherry. Whatever the process goes in the middle doesn't matter. But that's basically cherry coffee. But my dad started something called as parchment coffee.
What's
Parchment coffee.
Parchment coffee.
Yeah. So it's basically removing the coffee skin
okay?
from the fruit, yeah, and then removing the juicy mucilates that's there on top of the fruit. You're removing that, and all you have is the
Dry
washed
seed.
seed.
Okay.
Yeah, the washed seed. Yeah. So it's something that they had started back then. So this was he introduced it to our estate per se. Yeah. And that was his contribution to our estate. And yeah, then I started with specialty. So what's really interesting is that every generation we have tried to go a level up.
Nice.
And
It's very evident.
Yeah. So that's really nice, like getting to see how each generation is doing something different, stepping up their game.
So let's talk about your specialty journey.
Yeah.
What is specialty coffee, first of all? And what and all you have experimented or tried?
Okay. So, specialty coffee, in very simple for people to understand, is quality coffees, right?
Okay.
Where you're trying to pick only the best coffees, like the best cherries, the red ones, right? You're eliminating anything that's yellow, green, orange, Like that would be one of the main first things, right? Then it also is very important, like, say, for maybe 150 to 300 grams of your green cherries, the green beans that you have, you should not have, too many defects. So that's the level of quality we go
Okay,
through. Yeah,
got
that's
it.
the second thing. And the third most important thing is your coffee has to score 80 and above.
What is it?
80, like there is a scoring system, like from 1 to 100. So from 1 to 70 is your commercial coffees, 70 to 80 is your premium coffees that you would have heard of.
So how is the rating is based on? Like,
It's based on the flavor. You have
Okay.
to cup your coffees. So what they say, cup your coffees, is basically drink your coffees but not fully brewing it, like like how you brew your normal coffees every day.
partially.
Like you basically put in a cup, you put some of the coffee grinds, you brew the coffee, but not too much, in a very specific way. There's a recipe like for
Okay.
it, right? And then you take these cupping spoons, which basically look like your soup spoons, right? And you remove the crust that is made on the layer.
Okay.
Yeah, you remove that off, and then you have to slurp the coffee. Like it has to go all over your mouth.
Okay. Okay. Got
Yeah,
it.
and that's when people taste the coffee. Like they are called as like Q graders or cup tasters. Those quality. Quality people
Correct.
who are into all of this coffee
So
tasting.
they grade the coffee.
They grade these coffees. Yeah.
Can you bribe the graders? Specialty.
I
Just
haven't
kidding.
tried, so I don't know.
Okay, tell us more. Okay, then you were just drifted you somewhere. Sorry for that. You were saying
So these are the three main things required to call your coffee specialty.
Okay.
So when you ask what is specialty, so it has to have these three things. So if it has that, then it's specialty. Yeah.
and do they taste differently, like from other coffees in the market?
Of course, they are going to be more fruitier, more, having more flavors to
Okay.
it and more complex, basically.
Can the regular consumers can distinguish between the specialty coffee and the regular coffee they get in the market?
I think if you're a daily drinker, you'll definitely come to know the difference. But
Wow.
if you're not a daily drinker, still you can figure out. And if you definitely want to know, I think what would be good is trying to brew multiple coffees, like say 3 to 6 coffees, in different cups. You don't have to drink the entire coffee. You can have like a couple of people with you, and you just have to take one slurp each from each, coffee. Like right next, and you will actually come to know, the difference. Keep some commercials, keep some specialties. You can definitely come to know the difference. And not just that, even when you look at the grinds, you can just keep the coffee grinds in like 6 different cups, 6 different coffees. Just keep smelling from one cup to the next cup, and you'll actually get to know how different these coffees are. Because not every coffee is going to be fruity, right? Something could be more chocolatey, something could be more nutty. So depends on that.
How to make coffee chocolatey?
It's already there in the coffee cup.
Okay.
Yeah. So how we process it, and it also depends on the type of processing method. It's not like, see, there are few processing methods where you can be like, okay, this is what I want, and you can get that. But
It's certain.
sometimes
Okay.
these characters are already there in the coffee cherries, right? So that is what at the end translates to your cup. And I think some packets, they already write, what the flavors are. Like some of it will be fruity, some of it will specifically, they'll write that it's a nutty caramel type of, it's already written. So if you want something specific, maybe look at your packet and see
Okay.
what you're buying. Yeah.
So how did people respond to your specialty coffee experiments?
Actually, the first time, I got invited by Blue Tokai.
Oh,
to try
nice.
my coffees along with three other specialty producers who just started the same year with me.
Okay. What year did you start
I
specialty
started
coffee?
in November 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so I was basically, like pitching my coffee along with those Arabicas.
Hmm.
And when people
So your
were,
coffee variety is Robusta.
yeah,
Hmm.
so when people were trying, coffees from all over the table, they were like 20 coffees.
Okay.
And out of that, six are mine. And, it's like people are just like sloping. And
Hmm.
uh, they're like trying to figure out, what are the tastes.
Were you nervous?
I was not nervous. I was interested to see, how it's going, because it
Hmm.
was my first time cupping so formally. Like
Hmm.
I've cupped my coffees before, but not in front of everyone like
Okay.
that. And no one could make out that it was Robusta.
Hmm.
And that is when I knew that, okay, so whatever I've done so far working with this, processing, it's gone well. And yeah, they also picked two of their favorite ones in that. So I was really happy with that feedback because even people, were telling, oh, it's Robusta. I was hoping it would be more bitter or more rubbery, but it's not. And it rather had a very subtle sweet finish. And it was really nice to hear all of this. It was an amazing feedback for a farmer to get this from an end consumer. It just made us realize that, okay, we want to experiment more with these coffees.
I should appreciate the fact that you're reaching out people and not just sitting farmer in the farm. You just go out and experiment stuff and show your produce to and get the feedback and make things better. That's really great. And as you said, Robusta, and yeah, you grew Robusta and uh, you showcased Robusta coffee in that event. So and the rest of the others, they did Arabica, right?
Yeah. So
So
one plantation actually had Arabica and Robusta, but the remaining were all like, it was
okay.
mostly Arabica and very less Robusta there. Yeah.
So what's the difference between Robusta and Arabica? Like, are the only two strains of coffee in the world, or there are others too?
Actually, there are too many varieties, okay?
Okay.
But I would say the main two is Arabica and Robusta. But if you look at the main four, so after Robusta comes Liberica and then comes Excelsa.
Wow.
So these are also the varieties that are actually there here in like South India too. Uh, but Liberica is basically called as Marakapi. Okay,
Okay.
basically coffee from like
Tree.
tree coffee. And it basically has different flavors too. So, but I think Arabica is known for its, very fruity, very sweet type of coffee. Whereas Robusta has this thing where, people say, oh, this coffee is bitter or this coffee is rubbery. And they have marketed it in such a way for so many years that now,
Who marketed the market?
yeah, like the market.
The
Like
players
you
in the
just
market.
listen to anyone talking about coffee. They are always going to be like, oh, Arabica is great, Robusta is not. And because people have been saying that, even without tasting the coffee, sadly, they have that notion already in their mind. And I, as a Robusta grower, for me, the main challenge is making them taste these coffees and themselves saying that, oh, wait, this is Robusta.
Wow.
That itself is a big thing for me. And I get to hear it every event. So for me, it's really.
So you're breaking the misconception.
Yes, I'm
Nice.
breaking that. And also, Robusta is known to be used in blends.
What are
So
blends?
blends are basically a mixture of Arabica and Robusta. So I think it's something like 70-30
Okay.
or
So you can create a
60-40.
different drink just
Yeah,
mixing with
yeah,
the
just
different
mixing
ratios.
it. Yes. That's basically what they do with your South Indian filter coffees too. But at least here they drink it and they don't complain about it. But you
Yeah.
go abroad and they just name the coffee, it's a blend. Blend of what?
Yeah.
I don't know. and sometimes you also get coffees that are completely Robusta and they don't want to talk about it. They're like, it's just coffee. What coffee is it? Where did it come from? No one wants to really talk about it. And I actually went on a trip to Melbourne this time. And it was really interesting to get people to taste my coffees,
Wow, you took your coffee beans to Melbourne too.
Yes.
Wow.
I took it there and I wanted these cafes to actually try my coffee. At least just enough, to know like, okay, this coffee is coming
What is the
all the way
perception
from
of
India.
people?
Yeah, because on a global scale, whenever you talk about Indian coffees, they're not really interested to try it.
They
They're
just want
like-
Colombian, Brazilian.
Yeah, because see, no one knows what Indian coffee really tastes like. And even if they do, I think they don't find it that good, or they don't think it's like that palatable, They have a very different notion. And I think
Correct.
this kind of stems from, I think, us as planters, not trying to
Correct.
better it.
Yeah, I think
Because,
your work is directly could impact the price of future Indian coffee.
Yes.
Like if you can break the misconception. Have you tried blind testing them?
that is the future
Future
plan.
plan, yeah. We'll do a video on blind testing. Okay, then how did they react when you showed Indian coffee beans to?
A couple of them were very interested. They were like, okay, I'm gonna taste this right away, and they tasted it, and they were so interested that they actually gave us free coffees from their cafes to
Okay.
actually try at the same time, because me along with my parents went there and we got to taste these coffees, and it was like incredible.
Yeah.
It was like really good tasting coffees, but very different, of course, because it comes from all around the world, the coffees. But what I would like to say is,
How
some
are the
people-
Australian coffees different from Indian coffee? Like the coffee you get in Indian cafe.
I think it's because it's all around the world, coffees from all around the world. So it's very, of course, it's going to be very different from the flavor profiles that you're used to here. But it's still quite nice, interesting to actually taste, And I feel like some people were very interested to try these coffees, while some people were not really excited to try it. That's why the minute you say Robusta, they're like,
Oh, okay. They kicked
and that's
in.
a sad thing. That's a sad thing. I wish people, would be open to still trying these coffees and
Yeah.
not just judging it even before you taste it. Because sometimes planters are forced to not even say what the coffee variety is or what
That's the level of
species.
discrimination.
Yeah, we have to do that sometimes just for you to taste the coffee. That's not good.
People don't step up to taste.
I wouldn't
Robusta.
say like consumers. It's more on like
Yeah, these
the people who are
graders.
more more into trying it. Yeah.
So how is Indian coffee? Like everybody does grow Robusta, is it? Does anybody do Arabica in India?
Actually, there is lesser Arabica growers actually in India, but it's more about Robusta here. And also it depends on the elevation at which it's grown. So any elevation that's above 1,200 meters above the sea level is where you get your Arabica plantations. And then from I think somewhere around 500 meters to 1,000
So
is where
Arabica
Robusta
needs
is.
elevation.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what happens if I grow Arabica in a sea level? Like-
You can grow it, no doubt, but I guess the quality of it is not going to be that high because it requires those, low temperatures.
Okay.
And all the type of terrier, the climate, all of this plays a very big impact on your coffee.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like to imagine the flavor of coffee getting impacted by the altitude, mainly because of temperature or pressure, I don't know. But
Yeah.
if the factor is to do with temperature, can I grow coffee in a temperature controlled greenhouse? What do you think? I don't know.
I think it's possible. I think it is. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think people who are really into experimenting. Yeah.
Have
they
you
can try
seen
all
anyone growing coffee in the greenhouse? Like Mangalore, tropical environment, even if the coffee grow, it doesn't taste like coffee. So maybe having their own greenhouse could be a good experiment, right?
It is interesting. In fact, we do exactly that for our nursery plants. because we want them in a very controlled environment, right? So, but they have to get used to it once it's like 1 or 2 years. When we put the plant in the soil, they have to learn to adapt and survive there. So that way, yes. But as a whole plant in that, I don't think you need,
Yeah.
it's like babying a plant. So,
Correct. So what is Robusta known for?
I think Robusta is mainly known for its resilience, and the plant is very robust and resilient to the pests and the
Okay.
diseases that are there, and also very resilient to the climate change.
Wow. Okay.
It's actually able to withstand all of this, unlike Arabica, because Arabica is more of a delicate type of variety, species of plant.
Okay.
So we have the liberty to easily quit the use of pesticides.
So it
And
doesn't require any pesticide for
yeah,
the.
like we can utilize it if we want to, because of course there's a lot of rains
Yeah.
during the harvest, a lot of issues, but at least we are at ease that we can be in a position to at least leave it.
Correct.
Yeah, just try to be more sustainable. We have that because with these pests, what really happens is all the coffee plants are going to be affected, because there is this pest called as the berry borer. Okay,
It's a fungus.
it's a little bug.
Okay.
Which drills into the coffee cherry,
Okay.
and it eats the coffee bean that's there on the inside. So it basically hollows out the coffee bean,
Okay.
leaving
Hollow coffee.
Yeah, just hollow coffee, which is not good for you, and you can't take that into consideration when you think of quality coffee.
So Robusta can resist that bug.
It can, because the Robusta, the plants, because they have that caffeine content, what I would call it is the chlorogenic acid. It makes it more bitter.
What is that? Chlorogenic. Okay. The
Chlorogenic
compound.
acid.
Okay.
Yeah. So it makes it more bitter, and the bugs don't like it. Whereas Arabica is more of a sweeter type of,
Fruity.
fruity thing. And bugs get more, attracted to that.
it.
So in terms of that, we are in a much better situation. Yeah.
Great. So let's get into farming. So how does your typical Indian coffee farm look like?
So I think the first image that comes, when you think of a coffee plantation, is there are these little 4 feet coffee trees that are there. So we actually have trees also in the middle, like the local trees, like your fig tree, jackfruit, pomelo trees. So this is the type of environment in which coffee is. It's not a monoculture type of crop.
Okay.
And also there are levels of canopy that you get to see, like especially for Robusta in our plantation, we have at least 3 tiers of canopy. Whereas in Arabica, you normally get to see 4 to 5 tiers,
What do you mean by tiers of canopy?
So it's like different levels of canopy. So each tree will be of a different height, right?
Okay.
So when you get to see a plantation, right? It's like there are those shorter trees and then a little taller, and it's like 1, 2, 3. Like that's like 3 tiers of your canopy levels. It's good for different mammals that are there, the birds that are there.
Does
They
it
like
have
to
any
be
impact on the coffee?
It's more like when I did my research, right? It was we used to see at what level the birds used to be, like a ground level, a middle level, top level. So there are different types of birds perching on different, like your predator species and your fruit-eating type of birds, and then your granivorous.
So why is canopy important for Robusta? Like canopy is for shading, right?
Yeah.
So can we grow Robusta without shading? And if yes, what would be the output difference? I mean, does shading really a thing for coffee?
Actually, for Arabica, shading is very much required. But for Robusta, it's more of a sun type of plant.
Okay.
It requires the sun. But still, we have a particular amount of canopy that's there, like somewhere around maybe 30 to 60% of the canopy, which is very, very important, at least for the wildlife, and we make sure that at least that much is there. But when you're specific to coffee growing, of course, if it's like lesser, like 40%, that's good.
Doesn't placing like fruit trees in the coffee plantation attract wildlife,
It
like
does.
monkeys especially?
It does, but we also have to see what is our preference, how we want to look at the plantation.
Correct.
Each person has a different idea of a plantation. Some people care about just the coffee, some people care just about the different crops. But for us, it's more about the wildlife that has to coexist with our coffee. At the end, they were always there just like us, They need their little space too.
You truly are a fourth generation farmer. So when does the coffee flower?
The coffee flowering or the blossom time is actually during February, March.
Okay.
That's when we actually irrigate the coffee plants, which happens right after the harvest. So the harvest normally is going to be like December end, January mid, So 8 days after you have finished your harvesting, we already start with the irrigation so that the flowers bloom and they get pollinated, Yeah.
So do you guys pollinate or you guys leave it to the nature?
We actually utilize the bees that are already there at the farm. Like they want the nectar anyways. And they also pollinate the coffee flowers, which is the cross pollination. So from one flower of a particular tree, it goes to the next tree of a different flower. Yeah. So this is the cross pollination that happens, without which we would not be having any Robusta coffee.
Well, haven't you tried beekeeping in the coffee plantation? Would that be a good idea, like beekeeping in the coffee coffee farm?
It is a good idea. In fact, you can try to get different types of honey also from the coffee plantation.
Yeah.
A very interesting thing, a lot of people are actually into this. Also an interest that I was into. I wanted to try this, but of course I've been trying different things and it was not possible to actually do this.
So how long does it take for if I plant a coffee bean into the ground, and how long do I have to wait to get the first produce from that plant?
So it will take about 4 to 7 years for the entire plant to mature in a very nice way and actually give you ample amount of fruit. What the ideal plant basically. But when it comes to the flowering, right, and then you get the fruits, so that takes about 9 months from flower to that fruit stage. Yeah.
So what and all things you have to do to make sure, like from flowering to fruit, do you have to irrigate more or do you have to add fertilizer or something? Like how do you take care of the farm, like the growth of coffee plants?
So we irrigate during the blossom time, just before the blossom, and once the blossoms are like almost like they have been fertilized, we try to irrigate it again until the rains are persistent, right? So that would be somewhere around April, So until then, we have to continuously irrigate.
They're very water thirst plants.
Yeah. So once we finish irrigating, we start the compost work, that we have to do, like manuring also is very important. So
what happens in compost work?
So we actually try to utilize any of the coffee skin that has been a waste, right? And then the pepper vines that have been waste. Like all crops have something, that's left. So also the coconut, the skin, the
husk.
Yeah, the husk part of it. So all of that we dump into a huge pit, right? And then we layer it with the cattle manure and sheep manure if required. Then we also do poultry manure. And we try to also add water to it so that the water actually helps in the
decomposition.
Yeah. And we sometimes, after certain months, we want it to be completely decomposed.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually feed it with the trichoderma, azotobacter, pseudomonas. These are the microbes that we add in, so that
In the
it
form of
complete.
granules or something?
You
How do
get
they
that
look
as
like?
I
Like
actually.
trichoderma? I'm a microbiology student. I've seen them in microscopic, but how do
Uh,
you like?
they are already ready to use, like when you get it. I don't know, like they just apply it that way, they just spread it around. So maybe it is in spore form, because immediately the minute it reaches, it has to multiply.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they make sure it multiplies and, like, yeah, completely decomposes. So we do it on a ground level, like inside the
Okay.
ground there's a nice pit, right? This is in order to decompose in half the time. So if you do it on top of the soil, it will take about 6 months to decompose. So
Why is the difference? Like,
because there's a heat generated inside, and
so
also the
heat is
soil.
trapped.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
also the soil that's there, surrounding it, also has microbes, so it'll definitely help.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, do you, add supplement the fertilizer with other artificial fertilizers, or you just rely on these organic like fertilizers?
So actually, when it comes to fertilizers, nowadays people go with Jivamruta. That is actually trying to utilize the cattle urine and the cow dung, right? And they make it into a slurry, put it into barrels, fill it with water,
Okay.
add a little soil to it because of the microbes,
Okay.
and also add in some jaggery or stuff like that, and let it ferment for about like 10 days. Actually, this is a very old practice that used to happen, and
It
yeah,
is getting back into
yeah,
fashion.
it's actually getting back into fashion because people don't want to be
Dependent on.
dependent on chemical fertilizers.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. So, is it really competent with the chemical fertilizer, the Jivamrita you told?
It is still like an experiment, but based on how people are really talking about it, it looks like
Promising.
it looks quite promising.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So, when does exactly harvesting take place?
The harvesting time actually starts from the end of November, right? Up to mid Jan. Yeah.
So, how laborious is the process?
I think the most laborious thing about it is picking the coffee, harvesting it from the tree. Because what really happens is you get to see a lot of climate change during that time, at least in the recent present,
Okay.
There's a lot of rains coming in, which is making the coffee cherries.
In the month of November.
Yes, like
Okay.
November, December, the peak harvest season. The rain comes and it makes the coffee drop.
Ooh.
Yeah. So when the coffee is dropped, and the farmer doesn't want to, of course, lose his
Correct.
hard work. So we are forced to manually hand pick them from the ground, which is so much more laborious.
Oh.
And to make it worse, because it rains, the coffees that are there on the tree, they try to mature more faster, making it harder to pick, because during rains it's quite difficult anyways to pick. And it also allows these coffee cherries to burst
Ooh, because of heat.
because of I think it's because of fast maturation.
Okay.
It's like, have you seen, like, you have fruits at home and you don't eat it, and it starts becoming bad and it starts breaking open and there are flies coming. So that's basically what's happening here.
Whoa. All this is because of climate change.
All this is because of climate change.
Okay.
Yeah.
So climate change is not just affecting coffee, but also it is changing the labor's work. Like it is making work more laborious as well.
In fact, it's not just about picking it, it's also about drying the coffee. So when it's raining so crazily, it's very difficult to dry the coffees. There's no sunlight. We are very, very dependent on the sun.
Correct.
And because of that, we are forced to innovate and try to do
Adapt
more things. Yeah.
something. So how do the like laborers pick the coffee? Do they climb the tree, or do they use the ladder, or do they just stand?
So the plants that we have, we try to restrict its height to 4 feet. so that any person can pick it with ease,
Okay.
But of course, there will be a couple of acres where, there's a particular variety that is allowed to grow, up to like 5. And sometimes you can't really pick because the branches are like, stretching way out of proportion. And people tend to climb on the stump of the tree, which is the bark. Yeah, they climb on it, they go on top of the branches. Some of them even try to hang on top and pick the coffee cherries at times. Yeah.
And has there any incident on snakes or something in your farm? Like, how evident are the snakes sitting in the coffee plant, and are the pickers should be very careful on?
I think my dad is more well versed with this. Of course, I have not got to see this during my time. But my dad always has stories about, how these snakes are always sitting on top of the coffee trees. And when the people are going to do their work, and suddenly, the snake is also scared.
Yeah.
And the workers are also scared. And they are both in such a scarce situation that they tend to get bit by these snakes. Yeah. And sadly, because we are in a very village from a village, that it's very difficult to find, these anti-venoms, and getting hospital suddenly, So it's a very scary instance.
Yeah.
But I think what I have got to see at the farm is the snakes actually, during the rainy season, actually trying to mate. That is the only thing I've actually got to see. Yeah.
I'm kind of interested in labor economics. So how do you guys pay the laborers, based on the productivity or based on the day labor?
We used to pay based on productivity before, but we have had instances where, they just want to pick as much as they can, and they never look at it as, they're damaging the plant.
Oh,
And that had become an issue.
So
now,
incentive drives the behavior.
yes,
Right? Yeah, this
and
is
we
a good
do
example.
want to spoil the plant, so we make sure that we pay on a daily basis instead. Now,
How do you guys pick the berries? Like, how do you guys differentiate if this ripen or not? Like, what should be the best cherry to pick?
I think we mostly look at the color. Yeah. So the more red the coffee, the better it is. And also, depending on the time, the type of shade of red is also important, because when you touch the cherry, if it's a bit juicier, it means it's like the perfect time to pick.
Okay.
Yeah. So anything that's like yellow, orange, green is not ready
So
to
you
pick.
guys
Yeah.
let it ripe.
We keep it on the tree. We allow it to ripe depending on maybe a week or two, depending. See, if it rains, then within no time, like very quickly.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then it takes a little time, to actually pick it. So when we are picking specific reds, that's normally during the early harvest. Like I told you, we start in November. So I think like from November end to December starting, I think we pick the coffee very selectively. Right. We call it selective picking for picking these red, And we also, the other name is called as fly picking.
What's that?
It's the same thing, just has another name. And the other thing is, during peak harvest times, we strip pick, which basically means stripping off all the coffee cherries from the plant.
Okay, even if it's green.
No, it's not green, because
Okay,
it's
okay.
peak harvest
By
time.
then it
Everything
was
is all
everything
red.
red. Okay.
Yes.
That is better, no?
That's
Like,
easier, of course. But if
what
we
is the
leave,
cons of it?
but if we leave the red ones just like that at the starting, and we don't pick it, it allows the borer to drill into the coffee,
okay.
and it gives it more time to reproduce within that cherry and infect all the other plants.
So
in
everything
the
has a pro and con.
yes. That's why we are forced to pick that. Yeah.
Is there any scope for mechanization here, like maybe like vibrating a tree and then collecting the ripe one? Like,
Yes.
is there any such innovation happening, like mechanizing the harvesting?
If you see abroad, right, they have picking these coffees in a very mechanized way. I think in places like Hawaii, I'm not
Okay.
so sure. Yeah, but I think we have to understand that there's a level of skill and precision when it comes to manual labor doing it. There's a reason why that is
That's why
good
it
and
is.
important. Yeah.
So
Not everything should be that mechanized, but sometimes yes, because the labor is very expensive. People are drawn to go with,
yeah, and
going with
in
machines.
future one can expect the labor shortage problem.
I think it's already started.
It's already
Yeah,
started,
it's
right?
already
Yeah,
started.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think the next way is to
Yeah.
automate it. Like,
At least now we are able to get workers. Sadly, difficult to get skilled workers.
there's a
There-
big difference.
Yeah, there's a lot of difference because then you're forced to teach them this is what you need to do, and there's only so much you can teach in that period of time.
Who has to teach the? I mean, does government take any responsibility in skilling up the coffee?
I think it's based on their experience. I think that's the main thing. But say an unskilled worker comes to your estate, you are forced to teach them. But say, for example, you are a new coffee planter, you don't really know how this goes, you can always take the help of Coffee Board. They are more than willing to teach you for free. All you need to do is call them up or send them an email saying, I want you to teach this particular thing to my laborers, and they will come to your estate. They'll give you a time slot, a day slot, and do it.
Okay, so what's after harvesting coffee?
So once we are done harvesting, we actually process the coffee. Yeah.
So what happens in processing?
So it depends on the type of process you want to do. So there are like three main types.
Okay.
The first one is called the natural process,
Okay.
where what I said as cherry coffee, right? Taking the cherry, whatever process you do, and then it ends up being a dried cherry at the end. So that is basically natural process. Coming to the next one is the honey process, where the coffee cherry, you squeeze the coffee cherry, and the seeds come out, and just utilizing those seeds along with the mucilaginous, the fruity things still
Jelly
on
stuff
it.
outside the-
still on it. So that's why it's called honey. And then you also have washed coffee. That is basically you remove the seeds, you also wash it with water and remove the mucilates that's there on top.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
very laborious, I feel like.
We have machines actually for
Okay.
it from a very, very long time. So I think people are kind of used to this. Yeah.
Okay, so don't you guys dry the coffee after you get that from the farm, or you directly start with the processing it?
We can dry it,
Okay.
but then it will become a commercial lot. It won't be a specialty lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is commercial and specialty, or what's the difference?
Commercial is you're not actually looking so much for the quality aspect. You just want to produce it
And sell it to the traders.
sell it to the traders, make your little money that you're gonna make. Yeah. That's basically
So
commercial.
for
You're
specialty,
kind of
you have
trying
to put the
sell
hard
it.
work after picking the coffee.
Yes, we have to, because at the end it's all about quality. If you want that 80 scoring and above, you have to do it. Yeah.
I've heard like farmers in Brazil, Colombia, and even El Salvador. There are many, major coffee growing nations in the world. So their farmers are known for like unique experimenting, processing, coffee processing. So my question would be, do Indian farmers experiment on processing?
I think the new generation is very interested with experimenting with the coffees,
Example is you.
Yeah, yeah. But I think there were still quite a lot of people who used to do, these experiments, in the previous generation. But I feel like they have kind of kept it like a secret, and, they never wanted to actually tell it out loud, And I think most of the things that we have been doing with specialty coffee, other than the fermentation bit, I think most of it used to happen back, those days, back many, many generations ago. But over time, coffee has become very commercialized. Everything is about money. How less do I need to do to get this much of amount? And I think that has kind of degraded the quality. It's not that bad, but it's just that, I think it could be better, like
Yeah.
speaking as, how it used to be, like in comparison to that. Yeah. Because you can only experiment once in a year. Because
Correct.
then it comes to the next year and
Correct.
retrying something that
So,
has not worked. Yeah.
so even if they discover something new, that would be definitely a trade secret. I
Yeah.
don't think they would let that knowledge out because
Yes.
they have taken, many experiments. Yeah. So, do you have any trade secrets?
Well,
Just kidding. I mean, you need not reveal it. By the way.
actually, I think it depends on how long you are fermenting the coffee. I think that's something a few of the planters want to talk about.
Okay.
Some people even put it on the packets. While I think some people would be able to give this, but they would not want to tell to what extent they have done what type of process. Like, for example, some people can do an anaerobic at the start, then do an aerobic later, or do a carbonic, whatever they want. So, those are called as double ferments. So, these are some things that people might not put out. So, of course, if you say it's this particular thing, it could still mean that, oh, the recipe has hidden things in it. So, that, of course, people are not going to say.
So, have you tried any fermentation technique by yourself?
Yeah, so we have done the frozen cherry.
So, what
Coffee
happens
this
in
year.
frozen cherry?
So actually, we take the coffee cherries, the best ones, right?
Okay.
And we bag it well. We let it to
Like bag it with an aerated bag?
no, we bag it and put it in an anaerobic environment,
Okay.
right? And then we make sure that it's frozen for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you, like with ice cube? I mean, like,
No, we put it directly into the freezer.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we put
okay.
it directly into the freezer and allow it to ferment.
Okay.
And yeah, and then we let it, come out of the freezer, let it thaw as slow as possible on its own, making sure that not everything thaws, very differently. Like they have to thaw at the same time.
Okay.
And then, then we put it on the raised beds and
So-
slow dry it and, allow it to still ferment, but not ferment to,
Complete.
yeah, complete.
I mean, did the taste of it surprise you or something?
It was definitely very interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
In what angle?
In the taste profile, it was because it was one of our longest ferments so far, and being a natural processed frozen cherry, it was like something we never assumed it could taste like. Like people tasting this would be like, no way, this is Robusta,
Was it?
and I also got to compare this coffee with another coffee that we tried this year, which was an yeast ferment, and it took only 24 hours. But it was really interesting how that particular yeast made that coffee taste just as good as this frozen cherry, which was our longest ferment.
Okay, even the strain of yeast you guys
Yeah.
used to ferment,
Yeah.
matters a lot.
Yes, because the frozen cherry was the indigenous yeast that were already there on top of the cherries, at the farm. But this was a particular strain, that was used, not
Wow.
from the farm. Yeah.
Very interesting. So, what's after processing and fermenting?
So once we're done with the fermentation, we actually dry the coffees. And because it comes to specialty coffee, we try to dry the coffees in a much slower way, right? So that we allow the fermentations to still
Take
continue.
place, okay.
Yeah. But not at that level
Rate.
as it was, yeah. But a little bit slower and still pushing it so that it's more sweeter.
So, is it
tastes
sun
better.
drying or just air drying or
So
something?
we sun dry, then we shade dry, and it is we get to choose like how much time we want to sun dry it, shade dry it, or if we want particular days only to shade dry, and then
That
switch
also
to-
matters
all
in
of
the
that matters.
coffee
Yeah.
taste.
Yeah.
What do you guys do when there is, like, as you said, climate change interrupted by like you see unusual rain patterns in the month of drying season or something?
Yeah.
So what do you guys do when there is rain? You can't sun dry, right?
Yeah, because we can't sun dry it, we are forced to innovate, right?
Okay.
We are forced to innovate, and we have polyhouse tunnels that
What?
we make. We call it the polyhouse tunnel,
Okay,
which is
tunnel,
basically
okay.
a little tunnel that we make, and we cover it with the solar tarpals.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Mm-hmm.
and it basically tries to pull in as much as the solar energy to dry these coffees
Okay.
at a very even rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also to make sure that it dries in a very uniform way. It's normally quicker if there was sun, but because of the rainy condition, of course, there's barely any sun in the sky, and it has to pull in as much as solar energy it can, produce. And in the meantime, we also have turbo fans for it, and exhaust fans, and dehumidifiers to remove as much as humidity as possible, because we don't want the coffees to be breathing and dropping its own sweat on it. Yeah, so we try to expel any of that humidity and heat that's there.
I'm now more interested on the innovation in the coffee farms in India, and especially your farms or your neighboring farms. What and all innovation is happening?
I think the next innovation I'd like to point out is the clonal propagation.
What
Yeah.
is that?
So it's basically there is a coffee tree, and there is we call it as suckers, okay, which is basically the new shoots that are coming. That's what we call as suckers, because
Okay.
it takes as much nutrition. It sucks the nutrition
Okay.
from the floor, from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the shoots that we want to cut off,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so that we can make new plants.
Okay.
Now, why we do this is we try to select a particular type of plant. Like, for example, its yield should be really good. The amount of coffee uh, clusters that are there on the branch have to be much more closer and more more in
Yeah.
number. And also, the structure of the plant should be very good.
Yeah.
So these are some of the qualities we are looking for. So when these qualities are met, the suckers are taken and they are propagated at the
Wow.
nursery.
So the farms would be very uniform, right, in the
Yes,
future,
yes.
if every plant has gone through clonal propagation.
Because it actually gets its own the same genes, it's the same plant
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And in fact, the coffee board has been very interested in their research
But
in this. Yeah.
don't you think there would be a risk, like if there is no diversity, like just a thought exercise, like the same thing happened with banana. If there is monoculture, like the same plant, because clonal propagation would be like the coffee farm with the of a same plant, not same, yeah, they're just the same organism. So if that organism is quite vulnerable to one particular fungus, then that means it can like whole farm can be destroyed.
I think what's important to notice is this is not happening at a particular farm, right? It's happening at different farms, and especially because the coffee board intervenes with this, they try to get the suckers from different plants, from different estates. So it's not
Maintaining
like
the
from one
diversity.
farm you're just taking it everywhere. No,
yeah,
it's multiple types
Nice.
of plants, and they are basically making this even at the coffee board, and they provide it to different estates that can't do their own.
Who tried clonal propagation at your place?
Actually, the coffee board itself suggested it at first.
Okay.
In fact, they came to our estate and they chose 2 of the plants, and they marked and tagged it, and they harvested the coffee cherries from
Okay.
it. And they also made sure that they waited and they took the suckers and did it back in their own little
Nice.
patch of land. But they always told us, please do this clonal propagation. Of course, we've had some, ideas with it, like because we used to always use the beans to
Yeah,
plant. And for us to switch from that to this, we feel different things, because as a plantation, it's not just the coffee planter who gets a say, but also the workers and the writers who actually get to see its progress, because they will always come back to
Correct.
the planter and say, hey, this didn't work out, or this worked out, maybe this is not good. And sometimes there is truth in what they say, and it would vary very differently from what the researchers say. So I don't know why that is, but we have to take into account all these responses.
So what are other innovations you can recall?
The other innovation that I would like to talk about is using specialized tools for specialty coffee. Okay, so we have the refractometer or the Brix meter. Okay, which is a device we use to know the amount of sugar level that's there in the coffee cherries. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So we take the red coffee cherry. Okay. And then we squeeze the coffee cherry, getting the little mucilaginous, that sticky, sugar solution onto the machine, and then we close the flap of it and look at it through the eyepiece. Yeah, and you can get to see the number of the Brix, where it would be somewhere from 1 to 30. 30 being the most sweetest. So anywhere from 28 to 30 is a very good number for your coffee cherry to have, for the sugar content.
Wow.
Right? So we need to know all of this in order to know that the sweeter the coffee, the better the ferments. Right? That's why we want to do that. And the next device we have is the atmospheric temperature that we want to see. Right? Along with that, we also do the humidity. So you get to see the temperature and humidity at different times in a day.
Why?
Because we want to note those things down. Because today when I do this particular lot, next time they will be variables. And we want to jot down these variables to know how this particular coffee has tasted like.
You guys are getting data driven.
Yeah.
This is definitely a fourth generation coffee. Okay. Go on, please. Yeah.
And then we also have the bean temperature meter. Okay. Which we get to check the
body temperature of a bean.
Yes.
It's true.
Yes. So we do that in order to know how is it really fermenting, what is the heat at which the level it is, because the atmospheric temperature is going to be very different from the bean temperature. So we don't want the bean temperature to be very high, because then the fermentations could be restricted, So we wanted to go at a particular pace so that it's still slow drying and it's still allowing to ferment, That's what we want to see. So these are some of the machines.
So bean is in like drying pace, or it is in the tree itself?
No. When it is drying. It is drying. So it could be you're checking the bean temperature, maybe of the actual bean, or also the cherry, right? So you get to see at like what is the temperature of it.
Wow.
That is drying. And the other device is the pH meter. Very important for us when it comes to fermentations, because we want to know at what level it's being fermented. Like, is it in the starting stage of ferment? Is it mid stage? Or is it in the end stage? Because if it's near the end stage, then we have to be very careful when to stop it. Because if we ignore that indication, then it can go bad and you will be losing the entire lot. You don't want coffee to be like too fruity and then becoming spoiled. That's not what we want. Yeah.
These tools really help in like making specialty coffee.
So the other thing what we do is we make byproducts out of our coffee.
Like what byproducts?
So out of the coffee, we not just make the coffee, but we also utilize the skin, what we name as the cascara, that is the coffee skin, right? So we make teas out of it, or sodas or beers out of it.
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow,
yes,
okay.
Yes.
Are they sweet in nature?
They are sweet, and they also have some amount of caffeine also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, I think if you are a food scientist or food student, you should definitely check this out. I think one can make an energy drink out of it.
Yes.
Maybe, probably.
It has options. Yeah, I think we should see that.
Yeah, okay. You're directly capitalizing on the point. Yeah, cool.
And I think the other thing is we also make tea out of the coffee blossoms.
Okay,
Yeah.
This is different. Okay.
Yeah. So not only do we make the tea, we also make cocktails out of it, right? So that it is a different type of product coming from coffee itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So could you tell more about like blossom tea?
So blossom basically means the flower. So we're utilizing the coffee flowers and
to make a tea.
To make a tea.
Okay.
And then to make a cocktail also out of it. Yeah.
How does it taste?
It tastes very jasmine, oolong, and
Okay. Flowery.
yeah, vanilla type of flavor.
Okay, it's a new thing I've heard. Okay, it's picking up.
This is something very unique at our farm, something that we are very, very proud of.
Okay.
But many a times people ask, why are you utilizing these flowers? Isn't it going to be a problem for the fruits to arrive? And
No, you guys charge premium, no?
no, true. But
Yeah,
we
just
also
kidding.
make sure that the flowers that we pick, because of the climate change, like I said, it
Yeah.
rains. And what happens is there is early fruiting. Same way there's early flowering. Now, what happens during early flowering is most of these flowers, they make the plant give earlier fruits, which is something that we don't want, right? And at the same time, these flowers need to be blossomed at a particular time. So if it's early, the bees that are going to come during their specific time are going to lose out on the nectar.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how you, change that scenario, I mean, the fact into innovation, like blossom tea. Great. Yeah. Very interesting.
So because of all of these reasons, we make sure that what we really pick is specifically the ones that come early. Yeah, the early flowers are what we try to pick and make it into teas. Yeah. And it gives us a very nice opportunity to talk to our customers about climate change, how it's really affecting us. And
It's a nice way of presenting them
yes.
blossom tea and
talking
about climate change.
Because I think it's very important to talk about these aspects, because a customer would never understand, these are the things actually happening at the farm. Yeah.
So, did your customers love the taste of blossom tea?
They really love the cocktails more than
I
the
want to
tea.
try this though, yeah.
Yes. I think even my parents were like, the first time they tried it, they were like, oh wow.
So it was your initiative.
Yes, of course.
Nice. So what other innovations you can recall?
So the other innovations that people can try that I still haven't tried is actually making coffee wines.
Coffee wines.
Yeah, out
Wow.
of the coffee skin, you can try making these wines. Also, out of the mucilates that I was saying, where you're making your washed coffees, of course, the mucilage is going to be a waste. So you can definitely make jellies out of it, jams out of it. It has a whole separate thing with food that you can definitely work with.
So let's talk about sustainability in your farm. Even it has been your goal since you came back to your farm to make your coffee farm sustainable. So how do you make a coffee farm sustainable?
Like I told you, how the birds were being affected, that is what that drove me into the whole sustainable aspect. Because of the amount of weeding that we used to do, of course, these birds were affected. So we made sure that we reduce the amount of weeding, to only the times when we really require it. Like when we manure the coffees, when we harvest the coffees. Those are the main times when we require
So
this.
weeding is removing the unwanted plants from the ground.
Yeah, basically the weeds, so that, people are able to walk in the estate, do their work.
Correct.
Yeah, we don't want to hinder them, because allowing that, then the snakes also will come and, they'll feel like very homely, and then they'll leave our laborers very scared. Yeah.
So you balanced the wildlife aspect into sustainability.
Yes.
Nice. So what other fronts on sustainability?
Yeah. So the other things that I also do is we have completely stopped the use of pesticides.
How?
Because we actually try to use a sustainable trap that is made by the coffee board, where they have these little white bottles, okay? And within it they have a small little container which has pheromones and alcohol that actually attracts these pests, and
Very
traps it into these little bottles.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. What pest exactly you're talking about?
The berry borer.
Okay,
The one which drills into the coffee
bean.
and hollows out the bean. Yeah.
Wow. Has it been effective? Like how
Yes.
do you compare its performance with the regular pesticides?
It's quite good.
Okay.
Of course it's not going to be like that effective as pesticides.
But still better than pesticides.
But definitely better than, because this is a type of issue that could spoil the entire plantation. So we have to utilize something. It's not like we can just leave it. So we have to, utilize something in place. So that is a very important aspect for us to.
So, so you manage to get you manage the wildlife aspect of your farm, then pesticides, and any other in the sustainability front?
We are trying to get in more local trees, back to the plantation.
Very nice.
But
Okay.
this is going to take some time.
Mhm.
This is because there are so many ideas we want to implement at the farm. But of course, there
Yes.
will be a difference of opinion because it's
Correct.
one plantation, but many planters, different ideas, different, and everyone needs to be on the same page in order to do certain things at the farm.
Let's talk about economics and sales. So let's not get into the price into details, but let's not get into the numbers. But I just want to know the sense of is the coffee price, how fluctuating is the price?
I think over the recent years, the price has been going a little higher because the coffee production is lesser because of climate change and all of that.
Okay.
It has definitely affected. Um, but even though the prices have gone higher, what is really important to realize from a farmer's perspective is so does the labor charges, so does every other charge.
Correct.
Yeah. So that is very important to also think about with this price also increasing. But yes, it is very, very fluctuating when it comes to the coffee prices. And sometimes you have hopes that it's going to go way higher and you wait, and sometimes it just crashes. So you need to be very careful as a
You
farmer.
need to have a trader mentality as
Yes.
well when you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to keep checking with people, okay, is it going to go, higher or lower?
Okay.
Of course, people can't say, the exact thing.
Can't predict.
Yeah, can't predict. But at least, you should know what people are thinking and being
Requires a
that.
lot
Yeah.
of patience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think, okay, I'm going to get this much. And then when it goes low, you're like, oh, no. This
Give
is not
up.
how, you just give up. Yeah.
So, what is the average output you can expect from a average coffee plant in a year?
Average? The output, I would say somewhere around 4,000 beans.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be about 2,000 cherries because each cherry has 2 beans.
So, how many coffee plants can be grown in a 1 acre of land?
In an acre, depending on the distance, like some plantations go for 18 to 8, then you can have like 680 plants, per acre.
Per acre.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then if it's like 10 into 10, the distance, then it's going to be lesser, maybe like 500 or so. Yeah.
Then my next question in economics would be how to maximize the revenue from a coffee farm.
I think what's really important to notice is where you can cut down the costs.
That's a very good angle to look at.
Yeah. Because we are always thinking, okay, I should do this, I should do that. These are the most important things. But sometimes looking at the pricing and the way how things are going, it just makes it more of a loss than a profit. So we have to be very careful what we really have to cut down. Like, is this really required?
So where are the things you can cut down the cost?
I think when it comes to like the harvesting time, the processing time, you have to get to choose how much you want to sort these coffees. And if you want to sort these coffees for a lesser time, sort as in you only want the red coffee cherries, you don't want any greens or yellows, then you need to know like to what extent you want to sort it. Or you have to pick certain coffees during a particular harvest time, like maybe peak harvest time or something like that. You should know like how to minimize that, like how can you skip it but still not compromise on the quality aspect.
So the cutting cost part is to do with the labors and time required, right?
Yes. So that they don't actually have to work as hard, but maybe the nature itself can do it for you.
Nice. Now let's talk about your role in the farm. So how do you manage what do you think you are responsible for, and what do you just look at?
Actually, I started with managing the estate, so that's how I used to look at my role. But ever since then, I've started producing these fine robustas. So I'm very, very much involved into producing and processing these coffees.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, it's all about from picking the coffee cherries to sorting it out to floating the coffees. That is what is heavy. The heavier coffee beans is what we choose. So anything that's lighter is like removed off. That's what we call as floating. And yeah, then we go to the ferments. The type of ferments, the type of process like natural or honey or washed, what exactly you want to do. And then also getting to choose who really should taste these coffees, like which type of roaster you want to give it to, all of that. And I think the other role that I have at this farm is actually having farm visits where people get to come to the origin, get to see how this coffee is really processed, how is it made, getting to taste the coffee cherries also, and getting to see the bricks reading, like I told you, how much sugar content is there within the coffee. All of this they can actually get to see.
Hands-on experience.
Hands-on experience, yes. And also they can harvest the coffees themselves if they are really interested, Of course, it's chargeable.
Yeah.
And along with that, we also have, the coffee tasting. So once they've seen the complete process of it, we also give them a taste of the coffee so that they know, I don't have to say like, okay, you've tasted the coffee cherries. So I can just be like, how does it taste? I don't need to say that, oh, this is Robusta coffee, this is how it's going to taste. I'm going to wait for them to answer. And most of the times, yes, they are not in a position to say that this is Robusta coffee because it's sweeter, it's so subtle and so nice. So I get that feedback also at that same time.
So when do you host your events?
I normally have my event during December, which is the peak harvest time. And then I also have my events specifically during February at the farm. Okay, that is because I want to showcase about the blossoms, the coffee blossoms. But other than that, I also go to different cafes and roasteries and get to meet the end customers, where I also have events for them to taste these coffees, especially when I'm launching a particular coffee, a particular process, a particular lot, where this basically happens all around the year. It could be any time.
So
I get to choose.
till now, how many events have you hosted?
So far, I've actually had, I think, 13 events.
Wow, that's a good number. And I mean, lucky number as well, 13. So yeah, what has been your guest feedback? Are you hoping to continue more?
Actually, I am trying to understand, their perspective because I'm always getting
Perspective on?
perspective on the taste of the coffee, because I think it's very important to understand when a customer tastes, it's also subjective to who has roasted the coffee or how the coffee is being brewed. So these are some of the variables also I need to see, because the same coffee could be roasted by someone else and tasted completely different. So it's very important for me, when I meet an end customer, when they give me this feedback, how I'm going to utilize it for the next year. How do I need to ferment these coffees for the next year? Maybe a particular lot has worked very well. So then I can replicate the same things with the details, that I have, and replicate it and sell it to the person who wants the same lot the next year. Could be the same roaster or different roaster. And it's very important for me as a planter to take all these coffees roasted by different people during these different events and go back to the farm at the end of the year and cup them all together, because then I get to choose, okay, this is roasted well, this tastes better. And I basically get to choose and understand my coffees based on the roast and based on the brew, based on the flavors, that what is good. Yeah.
How do people get to know there is an event happening at your place? Do you have a website or something?
I actually have an Instagram page called as Coffee and Love.
Okay.
Yeah. And I keep posting what really happens at the farm. Yeah. And at the same time, I also put up stories saying that, hey, this event is there at this particular place. And people can always send a DM. Yeah. and they can be a part of the event. I can
Okay.
register them, right from there.
So if I come to the event, what I can expect?
So if it's a farm visit,
Okay.
then definitely you can expect to pick the coffee cherries, taste the coffee cherries, get to see how we are processing the coffees, what maybe we'll be doing a particular ferment for that day or that week. So you'll get to see that particular
So I
one.
can experiment as well with the ferments.
Well, if you wait for a longer time, maybe
Okay.
for a few days, I could let you
Are you
even make
welcome?
coffee wine for
Okay,
sure.
cool.
But yeah, and you'll also get to taste the coffee cherries, like the coffee, the brew also, while you're at the farm. But if you're talking about the other events, you get to hear about what I have done at the estate, my work that has gone, and also kind of understanding the story behind each of these coffees. Like for example, I might launch a tribal brew coffee, which is the name of a coffee that I have given for a particular lot.
Specialty, you're one of the specialty
One
coffee.
of the lot, I would name it the tribal brew, or
Okay.
I would name it Ben's brew,
Okay.
or basically all these names, And during the launch events, I tend to tell the story behind why I have named this. Because when I'm selling the coffees, I'm also selling the story.
Correct.
Getting people more connected to the origin and the idea of why we have done this.
I follow your Instagram page and I've seen you like networking like many people. This is unusual for me. Like I've never seen like it's pretty unusual for a farmer to network with the end customers. Like, so whom do you network with? Like, is it the coffee traders or coffee enthusiasts or like general public? And why is it really important?
Actually, if you talk about the previous generations, it was all about coffee going to a trader. So always the networking was with the trader.
Okay.
But because it's specialty coffee and we have a completely different vision, because we want to bridge the gap from the farm to the end customer. We want to bridge that gap. So what we really do is we try to sell some of our coffees to the roasters, right? So we have to network with them most of the time.
The roasters.
Yeah, the roasters is the main thing that we do. Then we also network to the cafes, especially when it comes in terms of events and them also buying our roasted coffees. And I think when it comes to networking to the end customer, it's mostly about them wanting to taste the coffee. So we also make bags of coffee that they can try, not just try from the roaster, but we also have separate lots that we like to sell ourselves, because that's the whole point of specialty coffee. And yeah, this is how we bridge the gap and get in connect with each and every person. And it's very important for us, because for me, at the end of the day, I want the person to know from where the coffee has come, the hard work that has gone behind. And at the same time, I want your feedback. These are the things that I really want. That's why I network with the whole lot of people.
So did networking reap any benefits to you?
Of course, because people have been coming to know about the coffee and they want to taste things like coffee blossom cocktail, something very unique.
Wow, okay.
And they actually want to be a part of this, And we are basically giving that option.
So whom else do you want to collaborate with?
So far, I've been collaborating with roasters and processors, but I think it's very important to collaborate at the end of the day with the farmer himself. Because if I cannot pat the back of my neighboring farmer and tell him the few things that we do, how can I expect Indian coffees to be there be out there in the global scenario? I think it's very important for us farmers to help other farmers also get there, because at the end, everyone needs to know how Indian coffee is on a global scale, and for that you need to start from scratch.
So how collaborating or supporting, getting farmers together would like boost the Indian coffee?
I think the most important thing is planters getting to taste their own coffees with respect to tasting the surrounding, neighboring coffees. So if you can all have a nice cupping test together,
Nice.
that would be a nice thing for people to understand their coffees and know, okay, so I've fermented it in this way, I've done this, and you can always exchange information. Of course, you would not want to say every little detail, but at least just enough that it's pushing that person to at least try something new.
So, yeah, this would be my last question. So, most of my viewers are students, like college students doing higher education. So, do you have any internship opportunities at your farm?
Actually, we are very interested in giving these opportunities because we do so many fermentation techniques. And I feel
Okay.
like a lot of research needs to go behind it, a lot of understanding, because we as farmers would definitely not get the access of research as much, and also the labs, where people
Okay.
have at least that slight interest to actually work with, because that is our most important thing. We want people to be interested
So,
in
this
order to
would
work.
fall under food science. I mean, yeah, food science students or students studying specifically fermentation.
I think in terms of fermentation, we want microbiologists so that they get to see what type of microbes are really there during the fermentation. Then when it comes to biochemistry, I think it's very important to understand what types of enzymes are getting released, right? How is the metabolism really happening there? What is actually happening? Because we are in this generation, we are very interested in trying such unique experimentations.
Yeah.
So of course, all of this is not going to be already researched on. So I think all of this has a very wide opening for people who are really interested to come and intern.
So this is for the students particularly falling under biological sciences. So is there any internship or project or collaboration opportunity for engineering students? I mean, what I'm asking is there any opportunity or possibility of automating the farm or something?
I think what's important to understand is ours is a very intercrop based, Indian scenario of coffee plantations. Of course, we're having a lot of problems with labor, getting labor. So, of course, there are people wanting to mechanize the farm. There are issues that I wish the students can, help us mitigate. Because there are drones that are being used in couple of farms to actually fertilize the farms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are also coffee sorters coming in place so that they can sort the red cherries separately.
So vision technology.
Yeah,
something.
all of this is there, but I think it could be cheaper. Okay, I think it could be made to work cheaper, and at the same time, the red cherries should not be crushed. Like for example, where there's a green sorter, it will separate the greens, but it will crush the reds. Now I don't want the red cherries to be crushed because I want to utilize it for the fermentation. So these are some of the things we want people to work with. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I think we had amazing conversation. Like I got to know so many new things. So yeah, thank you so much for the podcast.
Thank you so much, Clinton. I really like that you've given me this opportunity. And I hope to see new young budding students coming to the farm, getting to actually intern at our estate. Thank you.
Great.